Greetings, welcome back to Black Bear News, where we are discussing abrupt climate change. And the hills of Los Angeles just get browner and browner. It's looking quite dry out there. Fairly scary. I am of the belief that it's not just heat stress. I know a few people have offered up the idea that maybe it's UV or ozone or other. I think it's multiple elements happening. Also, it may be that a reaction to the fact that the climate in Los Angeles is changing. It is not the same climate anymore. It's not only warmer, but it's wetter. It's more humid. So that perhaps could be making some kind of changes in how the plants are reacting. Who knows? All I know is that it does not look good. Real quickly, just a couple of strange political or news events. I don't know if you all heard that, was it the Senate Intel Committee? I don't know if I'm getting that right, requested that Julian Assange testify. That's pretty strange. A lot of people don't think that Julian Assange is even in the embassy, the Ecuadorian embassy anymore, because nobody's heard from him. He's been cut off. There are many theories out there. Some people think that he's already in custody, in US custody. Some people think that he's somewhere else, maybe in British custody. So we'll see how this unfolds. Also, I don't know if you all heard about the guy that stole the plane from SeaTac. Apparently an aviation mechanic stole an entire airplane. Like a large plane, I think it was called a Q400 Bombardier is the model of airplane that he took. Apparently he didn't have any flying experience, but did a whole loop-de-loop in a really big plane. So people are wondering how it was that this guy was able to pull off these maneuvers with supposedly no training or no idea how to fly a plane. And then he crashed into an island in the Puget Sound, and that was that. But very, very weird story. I don't know if you guys, this footage is crazy, so just go out there and if you haven't seen some of the footage, you can look it up. Moving on to some articles. This is from Counterpunch, and I believe Robin sent this to me. Dying of consumption while guzzling snake oil. A realist perspective on the environmental crisis. We're an egotistical, delusional lot, us humans. We're the only species on the planet who despoils its own life support system and who does not live within biological limits. Does that make us the most intelligent or least intelligent species? Preservation of our environment remains well toward the bottom of our priorities. Personally and collectively in our daily lives and in the media, we fixate on career, financial accumulation, economic growth, political performance, consumerism, entertainment, social media, and external validation. None of these aspects of our lives mean anything without a livable planet full of basic resources. And every one of these fixations contribute directly or indirectly to our planetary degradation. Noam Chomsky has even begun to recognize that our precarious environmental predicament, primarily envisioned as the issue of climate change, though it encompasses so much more, is the most crucial existential threat to human life on the planet. Of late, whenever you see Chomsky interviewed or hear him speak, he tends to emphasize that of many injustices and dire risks to the people of the United States, the people oppressed by US empire, and humanity as a whole, all pale in comparison to our environmental crisis. And that actually has been a late development, probably in the last year or two. Chomsky has been talking about climate change, but not on the level of political intrigue or whatever. But now all of a sudden it's taken precedence, and for good reason. In the fall of 2017, a group of world scientists issued a second warning to humanity, the first of which was delivered in 1992. If we do not make significant changes to our way of life immediately, we will no longer be able to ward off the inevitable precipitous decline of our planetary ecosystem as a result of our poor environmental stewardship. Still more scientists cautioned as recently as August 6, 2018, that if we do not undertake a social transformation, a host of positive feedback mechanisms would be unleashed, would, not could, thank you for saying would be unleashed that could soon render the Earth uninhabitable to many species, including humans. The scientific tendency towards conservatism in predictions of risk, as evidenced by the underestimation of the timing and severity of climate change by the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, would imply that time is of the essence. While an individual ecosystem is able to withstand and adapt to deleterious forces for a certain amount of time, if that injurious bombardment continues unabated, the ecosystem will finally reach a threshold, at which point it will collapse. The Earth's entire biosphere is no different. And yet, charlatan academics who cherry-pick data outside of their fields to support the elitist perspective, like Steven Pinker, as well as eco-modernists such as Ted Nordhaus and Michael Schellenberger at the Breakthrough Institute, and tech giants such as Elon Musk, would have you believe that we are living in the greatest era known to man, and that our human intelligence and innovation, particularly of the technological sort, will carry us through these perilous ecological times. It's an optimistic message that everyone likes to hear, but it is hollow at its core. Just read through their proclamations and manifestos. What you will find is wishful thinking based on flimsy, unsubstantiated premises that we all want to believe, so that we in the first world can carry on in our daily lives with little disruption to our usual profligate consumption, and especially to corporate capitalism. Indeed, fourth wave environmentalism, which too many of the large environmental nonprofit organizations like the Environmental Defense Fund, the Nature Conservancy, and the World Wildlife Fund promote, is predicated on corporate environmental partnerships and technological modernization. It is touted as win-win, yet in practice, it is nothing but a loss for the biosphere. On August 1st, 2018, we celebrated Earth Overshoot Day, the day when human beings had utilized more resources than the planet would be able to replenish in a year. The Global Footprint Network has been calculating this day since 1970, when it took us, on average, until December to utilize all the resources that the planet held for us annually. Now we use our allotted natural resources by August. Regardless of the margin of error in this estimate, it is clear that since all of this yearly overuse is cumulative and compounded over time, we have long overused planetary resources by this point, and we need decades for the Earth to compensate for our past and continuing gluttony, which is actually something that these other articles about that did not point out. That if we're overshooting every single year, how many years do we have of overshoot compounded? Obviously, some of us are more responsible for this conspicuous consumption than others. The Global Footprint Network, which the Global Footprint Network breaks down by country. Also, obviously, the United States sits near the top of the list of planetary abusers. While the ecological footprint is derived from a variety of factors, a simple axiom provides the truth about our resource use. Those people and societies who adhere to their basic needs live more sustainably than those who partake in their wants. The more one lives in excess of one's needs and more extravagantly in one's wants, the more responsible one is for the degradation of the planet. Thus, the richest among us, regardless of how green they purport to be, are the most destructive to the environment, and it follows that the richest and largest conglomerates and corporations will contribute the most to environmental destruction, which is another reason why corporations need to be dissolved. Concurrent with Earth Overshoot Day on August 1st, the New York Times Magazine released online before print Nathaniel Rich's lengthy piece entitled Losing Earth, which sought to chronicle the historical, political atmosphere surrounding the climate change debate in America from 1979 to 1989. Rich's premise is that during this crucial decade, the United States government had a chance to save the planet from the catastrophic global warming that we are currently experiencing throughout the globe, but because of their failure to act, we are left with our current climate predicament. Immediately after the publication of this piece, critics countered that Rich largely ignored the role of climate change deniers within the Republican Party and from the fossil fuel sector, who engaged in a concerted corporate disinformation campaign about climate change for decades. Instead, they say, Rich's piece placed too much blame on the collective human we. In a way, Rich and his critics are both right and wrong. We are all to blame for our ecological catastrophe, but our American government, which is now a de facto subsidiary of major corporations, along with the corporations themselves, and the rich who benefit most from corporate profits, are far more to blame than the rest of us because they have far more power and ability to enact changes and control societal norms. The poor basically bear no burden because when you are struggling to meet your basic needs, it's nearly impossible to prioritize anything beyond those simple human requirements. In any event, both Rich and his critics miss the big picture. Resource depletion and climate change are only part of the problem. Even if the US government and the entire planet had tackled climate change, the solutions offered at this point mainly concern switching to 100% renewable energy and possibly utilizing questionable geoengineering techno-fixes with untold unintended consequences. We would still be left with enormous global ecological issues. Our overconsumption, as evidenced by Earth Overshoot Day and simple observation, stems in a large part from our overproduction, which stems from our economic assumption that we must live in a world with incessant economic growth. Furthermore, what we produce and consume most, other than fossil fuels themselves, are synthetic substitutes, often derived from fossil fuels, synthetic toxics, the likes of which did not exist for more than 99% of Earth's lifespan, pose specific threats to organisms because organisms have had little time to evolve and adapt to them. The excessive production of, consumption of, and resultant pollution from these toxic substances may pose as large a risk to the planet, if not a larger one, than climate change itself. Ooh, pollution, yuck. Side note, toxics or toxicants, man-made substances that pose health threats to organisms. Toxins, by contrast, are produced by organisms, like the venom of a snake or the poison from a bee sting. This is an important distinction that scientists, doctors, advocates, and journalists should keep in mind, especially when discussing the danger of toxics to human health and the health of the entire ecosystem. Indeed, when asked about the environment, some prominent people, such as the controversial biologist Paul Ehrlich, have suggested that the toxic chemicals that we are distributing from pole to pole may turn out to be a worse problem than global warming. Even renowned British investment banker Jeremy Grantham surmised, I think chemicals will turn out to be a hotter button than climate change. Yet we continue to produce, consume, and dispose of these toxics unrelentingly. One of the most major toxic pollutants we boundlessly produce and consume is plastic. As recently as this year, many people first became aware of the enormous problem of plastic pollution, perhaps largely because the BBC documentary series Blue Planet 2, which took time away from its beautiful, awe-inspiring footage of marine flora and fauna to show the profound problem of macro and microplastic pollution in our oceans, or because of National Geographic's comprehensive series of reports, some people were finally alerted to a problem that was right before their eyes, but commonly disregarded. In response to the newfound knowledge, several companies and municipalities banned plastic straws and urged a reduction of our consumption of single-use plastics. Yet these measures will barely begin to curb the plastic problem. considering production of plastic is still on course to soar by 40% in the next decade. Not only is it vital that we try to eliminate the pollution already created, but we must curtail the stream of pollution that rolls off assembly lines every day if we are to make any progress whatsoever. The only real method to deal with the problem of waste stemming from our overconsumption is cutting it off at its source. That also means we must have the foresight and ethical fortitude to stop creating such unsustainable and toxic substances in the first place, no matter what fortunes we forego in the process. Indeed, plastic became an issue partially because it became too large and obvious to continue to ignore. See plastic gyres in the seas, plastics ingested in the bellies of birds, sea turtles entwined in plastic debris for just a small sampling. Much like rivers catching on fire or cities filled with smog in the 1970s. Still, there are so many other insidious problems with production and consumption and its attendant waste. In addition to plastics, we have numerous other persistent organic pollutants. Pesticides, industrial chemicals like PCPs and PFOAs, and pharmaceuticals lingering throughout the globe and harming the health of organisms and ecosystems in ways we have only begun to recognize. Many of these pollutants act as endocrine disrupting chemicals and can potentially cause a host of health effects through their endocrine mimicking ability. One of the major documented effects is the feminization of male animals, which has been consistently found in all vertebrates, and most recently in sharks. Males turning into females may not sound like a huge ecological problem on its surface unless you consider the fact that the loss of a male population could lead to the extinction of a species. Consequently, scientists are now wondering about what effects we may be seeing in humans. Effects such as decreased fertility, increased reproductive cancers, even ambiguous gender identity. We also have an epidemic of e-waste from constant production, consumption, and disposal of our consumer electronics. Our desire for non-essential products of convenience and entertainment, along with our technological gadgetry, computers, tablets, smartphones, has left the third world awash in a toxic stew, as some of our e-waste is shipped overseas to be dismantled for parts and burned for valuable elemental compounds if it is not buried in our own landfills. And much like all of these other troubles linked to overconsumption, the problem of e-waste just continues to grow. We currently have no true solution to the waste problem, to the waste and pollution from our overconsumption, unless and until we have the means of dealing with the waste stream of such items that probably should not be produced or consumed in the first place. Yes, recycling is not the answer, though green consumers would like to think it is. It both utilizes tremendous energy and produces toxic byproducts of its own, particularly the recycling of plastic, and it cannot possibly absorb all the products discarded. Plus, since recycling is just a market industry, and with China's decision to stop buying waste, most of what we hope to recycle is ending up in landfills, which are completely unsustainable at their core. For the past century or two, we've gone down a slippery slope of permissiveness in terms of environmental responsibility as a civilization, and we may never ascend from the bottom. The only true sustainability is biodegradability, meaning whatever resources we take from the earth are able to be returned to the earth. Ultimately, sustainability means that what we use returns to the earth in a timely manner that does not pollute, causing ill health or irreparable ecological damage. Consequently, almost nothing we call sustainable within our corporate industrial civilization truly is. Whole host of dings right there. For the most part, we can barely even compost the organic, decomposable items that could easily go back to the earth, replenishing the nutrients to and enhancing the quality of the earth's soil. Instead, these too end up in the landfill. Most of what we take for granted as benign is not. A lot of what we expect is safe at acceptable levels is not. For example, we spread over 1 billion pounds of biological poisons on our food supply each year in the US, but we call them pesticides. We hype their safety and necessity while we ingest immeasurable amounts of them, and while they migrate to our air, water, and ecosystems, all under the guise of progress, even sometimes sustainability. This is utter insanity. Maybe the alarming increase in mental health issues such as depression and anxiety is a reflection of a natural and normal attempt to cope in an utterly insane, overwhelming, unsustainable world rather than being reflective of physiological disease or genetic defect, both of which have yet to be found. We are polluting our minds with too much junk content, our bodies with too much junk food, and our planet with just too much junk. No one field is responsible for the predicament we are in, and no one sector will solve the problem. Every field, every industry in their current form is unsustainable and grossly polluting. Bam! This includes the military, finance, fashion, entertainment, information technology, agriculture, medicine, transportation, driving, flying, cruising, boating, engineering, construction, real estate, publishing, art, scientific research, even education, and let's throw music in there too, is hella unsustainable the way we do it at scale. But again, we do not need scientific evidence to notice what is right in front of us. I used to conduct a thought exercise with my students in environmental studies. I would ask them to pick any item from anywhere and to perform an informal life cycle analysis of that item. That is, try to find out about all the resources and energy needed to create that item, used during the life of the item, and emitted as pollution or toxic waste throughout the lifespan of the item through its end of use. Through this exercise, if you work in a hospital setting, you might discover that a chemical utilized in the process of MRI could end up as a toxic pollutant in certain ecosystems. If you work in IT, you might learn that server farms and promising new applications such as Bitcoin require extensive amounts of energy and resources to function. If you do this with any part of any industry, you will not need any special scientific training to discover our sustainability problem. The fact is, we need to make the environment a priority in every field. Sustainability cannot be a novelty or a footnote. Environmental impact must be the foundation of all disciplines. All students should be required to take introductory environmental studies classes. All academic subjects need to have sustainability as the base of their field. We cannot make green or eco-friendly niches within industries. Rather, we must strive to eliminate any practices and products that are not within our ecological limits and that are not necessary to our survival, because the overwhelming consensus of all scholars suggests that we are, without a doubt, imperiling our own survival if we continue on with business as usual. We need to deconstruct our lives. Right on. We need to take things away and abstain from what cannot be sustainable. Going way back to maybe a year ago, what we need to do is sit our asses down. Sit down. And a friend of mine suggested just stay at home. Stay home. Stop. Just stop doing all the things. Figure out what you need to just be where you are, stay where you are, grow food where you are. Make your circle very, very small if you can. Rather, we must, where am I? We need to create new norms, new stories, and new values. Perhaps the genius is not in the tech billionaire that creates unsustainable technology or questionable merit, but the wise person who could have intellectually created the technology, but who considered the social, physiological, and environmental ramifications and decided against it. I will also say this to the Thorium reactor people who, when I was saying no nuclear power, they're like, "Oh, thorium reactors," but we don't know what the consequences are. They seem cool. They seem like there's nothing wrong with them, and yet it seems like everything we do or make to try to make things better somehow makes things worse. Just reel in the desire to keep on going, keep on making new stuff. I mean, if it sounds too good to be true. Years ago, I read an anecdote about refugee immigrants from a third world nation who had settled in America. As a welcoming gesture, they were brought to a shopping mall, but rather than be awestruck by the array of products and consumer choices, they were overwhelmed and repulsed by the excess. If we are to survive as a species, we should all learn to feel this way. At this point, we cannot count on our government officials to offer real solutions, or at least solutions substantial enough to tackle the multitude of issues we face. It's as if we have a preventable and reversible illness that can be solved through a change of lifestyle. We go to the doctor to be diagnosed. The Republicans react by denying the illness altogether. Democrats ask for a magic pill because they do not want to go through the trouble of exercising, eating less, and only ingesting quality, nutritious food. Man, I'm having a hard time saying nutritious. Damn it. I'll stop. The rest of us in every sector of society, in every field, need to pick up the slack and make necessary large-scale changes in production and consumption on both the individual and systemic levels. What these changes amount to most of all is living simply, personally, and collectively. This is the true resistance. Hashtag. We cannot take for granted, as economists and industrialists do, that we will continue to produce and consume more. This premise, which undermines all of our research and policy initiatives pertaining to the environment, has been completely ineffective and must be abandoned. Americans and other first world citizens have the notion that their happiness, their desire for comfort, their want of cool gadgetry, their egos, their power, and their careers are more important than life itself. As a result, even the most environmentally minded middle-class people are too tied to their creature comforts, aka consumer excesses, that they still rank among the biggest consumers and polluters. Americans often deride others for living beyond their means, meaning their financial abilities, but no one ever worries about living beyond our needs, which is perhaps the fundamental cause of our suicidal path as a species. Anyone who did not grow up rich or even middle class knows that what it is like to sacrifice, knows what it is like to have to pick and choose, to only buy or use what is needed rather than what is desired. You know you have to live without. You can't afford to splurge. This is where we are with life on the planet. We can't splurge anymore as individuals, but more critically as industries and as societies. In fact, we couldn't afford to overindulge decades ago, and we should have never done so in the first place. We don't need science to understand this, and we don't need an ecological footprint calculator. We need empathy and a sense of connection with all of life on the planet. If we could learn to consume according to our needs rather than our decadent desires, not only might we all live more enjoyable, fulfilling, and healthy lives, but we all might just continue to be able to live. And that was a great article and took up basically most of the time of this video, so I don't know what else I'm going to be able to get into, but I really rather like that. Hope you all did too. Well, I'll read one more article, ultra scary, and then I will leave you for the night. Oh, actually, I want to read this one comment by Deanna Demers. And she says, humans will start dying out. Even children will die from disease, from warfare, from the hate that people show for life. Overpopulation, wasted money. No one owns the sun and no one owns the earth. There is no matter. We are all energy, vibrating and vibration, and the vibration is now killing us. Men are the cause of most violence. Read The Male Ego by Willard Gallen, MD. An older book, but more true today than then. You would think that patriarchal societies would die out because they are unbalanced. Patriarchal societies are bad for children and women. The toxins are everywhere, all man-made. Soon the air will be so fouled, no one will be able to breathe. The water will be so bad, no one will be able to drink it. The food is being taken over by crazy scientists who work for Monsanto, Bayer, and other nasty industries. Nature and the wildlife have no chance against the human influence. People are succeeding in changing the climate. What a disaster is coming soon. This is not science fiction. This is our only reality. Good stuff from Deanna, thank you. I'm going to wind up with this article called First Photos of Ocean Carbon Molecules Hold Clues to Future Warming. This is from Scientific American. The remains of tiny phytoplankton hold more carbon than all plants and animals. Will it be released? From undulating surface to inky black depths, Earth's oceans are littered with the carcasses of tiny life forms called phytoplankton that in life form the basis of the marine food chain. These microscopic ghosts contain a reservoir of carbon estimated at a staggering 662 gigatons, 200 times greater than the amount stored in all living plants and animals. That could come back to haunt us if unleashed from its watery grave as planet-warming carbon dioxide. Some of the carbon-containing molecules in these plankton remnants will remain locked away for millions of years on the seafloor, but some will break down and enter the atmosphere as carbon dioxide. A huge portion will continue to circulate freely in the ocean for generations, but exactly which molecules are destined for which fate, and therefore how much of this vast carbon pool is headed for the atmosphere via ocean warming, acidification, sunlight, or digestion by microbes is an outstanding question. Answering it requires a clearer picture of the structure of the molecules that contain this carbon. An international team of scientists has now taken the first photographs of these molecules in an effort to start parsing that out. This first glimpse suggests that while a catastrophic breakdown and release of carbon seems unlikely, there is much left to understand about the behavior of oceanic carbon. Only about 10% of an estimated 5,000 planktonic carbon-containing molecules have been identified. Despite existing in such vast quantities, most structures have only been hypothesized. Getting an actual look at them is challenging because collecting a mere millimeter per study requires filtering 3,600 liters of seawater, and the technique previously used to decipher what atoms were present required busting the molecules apart, giving little insight into the chemical bonds that held them together in the first place. In the new study published this month in Geophysical Research Letters, the team used a technique called atomic force microscopy to create visual images of carbon-containing molecules. First, the researchers isolated the molecules atop an incredibly flat surface in a deep vacuum, cooling them to 450.7 degrees Fahrenheit to make minus 450.7 degrees Fahrenheit to make them sit very still. Then a minuscule scanning arm with a single carbon monoxide molecule on the tip moved across the subject's molecule surface to measure peaks, valleys, and overall shape. Carbon monoxide has been shown to be the most responsive molecule for measuring these atomic dimensions. The researchers found molecules from near the ocean surface were difficult to image because they were three-dimensional, and bulky, says team member Leo Gross, an expert in atomic microscopy from IBM Research, Zurich. The deeper molecules were easier because their surface was planar. The study found the deep molecules are smaller and have a ring structure, which helps them to resist forces that might otherwise degrade them. This allows them to accumulate in the ocean. Radiocarbon dating indicates that some of them have been circulating through the depths for more than 4,500 years, whereas surface molecules may only be months old, because most are quickly gobbled up by microbes or broken down by sunlight or other biological processes. Team member Alicia Coppola, an oceanographer at the University of Zurich, suggests the deep molecules might be too diffuse for microbes to find, or that these remarkably hardy molecules might themselves be byproducts of microbe digestion. They're kind of like rubber tires in the ocean. They're likely unappetizing to microbes as well, she says. University of Miami oceanographer Professor Dennis Hansel, who has studied dissolved oceanic carbon extensively but was not involved in the new study, says the ability to image actual molecules represents an important advance. We ocean scientists do not know the protections in place that prevent this material from being consumed by microbes, he says, so these visually compelling results move us closer to the understanding. The differences in structure and stability between the surface molecules and those found in the ocean depths are just the starting point for understanding whether most of this carbon will stay locked away for the foreseeable future, or if conditions such as warming, acidity, or reductions in dissolved oxygen might trigger a much more rapid breakdown. Has been cycling for millennial timescales, and given its structure, I don't think it will change, Coppola said, but small alterations of climate can make a big difference because there's just so much carbon and it's present everywhere. Dum, dum, dum. I think that's all I have for you tonight, folks. Thank you so much for your eyes, your ears, and your conscience. If you would like to support this channel, you can do so at the links below. I hope you'll be back tomorrow with another video. Until next time, peace.